John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people watching us from around the world, you say, oh, you know where Canada is, in British Columbia on the West Coast. Right. And where are you, John, in British Columbia? Well, I'm about 500 miles north of Vancouver, or for our European friends, 800 kilometers. And so it's in the center of British Columbia, north, south, east to west. Today we got a very, very interesting guest. Her name is Emily McSherry, and Emily is a very interesting guest. She's the founder and CEO of Advize, a groundbreaking career exploration platform that's transforming how students discover their future. Big topic, especially in today's world. And she grew up in Texas at Clifton was the name of the town. Small town, no stoplights, and she will tell us all about Clifton as she grew up and started her career and started to go to school. She also, with no role models to earn, obviously in Clifton so much, she got her MBA of UCLA Anderson in California. Emily has turned her own career confusion into a mission-driven business, generating six-figure revenue in the very first year. She tells us all about that. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thanks, excited to be here.
So take us back to Clifton, where you were born, I presume, and then in Texas, and then it took you to the learning about big cities, quite a move from Clifton down to Los Angeles, I would suggest. And then lots of stoplights there, or traffic lights. And then you went to the University of California, or UCLA Anderson, and it took you into a career and then into a new direction that included new ideas, new technology, AI, and how to find jobs and all of those kind of things and careers. Start with that.
So just that. So going back to the beginning, I was born in Tucson, Arizona, but I did move away pretty quickly. And my dad was, and this still is, in the mining industry. So you know where mines are?
Yeah.
Middle of nowhere.
Yeah, they are. We have quite a few here.
So he's currently on a mine in the middle of nowhere in New Mexico, and he grew up on a farm. So my dad always liked the small town, home kind of experience, and he wanted us to have a little bit of that as well, which brought us to Clifton. So in my town, when I lived there, like you said, there were no stoplights at this time. I think there is one now because I visited it not too long ago. But there were about 3,000 people in the whole town that I grew up in. So if I were to describe that experience, I would say that it was honestly, I felt like I had the world figured out because there was only 50 people in my grade. I was the first student body female president. I was the captain of every sports team. My family had a nice 10-acre property and everything was chill, right? Like animals and peace and all of that. And then what really changed was going into high school, my family decided to move back to Tucson, Arizona for my dad's work. And Tucson, Arizona is not a big place, right? Comparatively, but compared to Clifton, it was.
Yeah, not
so,
compared to LA, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely not compared to LA. So kind of going back to my childhood comparison, I went from having 3,000 people in my town to having thousands in my one high school. And there were 16 high schools in this one town, plus all the culture shock of, saying y'all and like being nice. And then all of a sudden everyone's like, what is this girl saying and doing and whatever. So,
yeah.
So that was a pretty big change, as you can imagine.
Yes.
Yep. And then kind of through that, go ahead.
Go ahead. No. I want you to take us through it from Clifton to Arizona to Tucson, Arizona. How did you end up in LA and then to go to the university and get an MBA. So did you then already decide on a destiny? Where did you want to go?
I was a bit of an ambitious child. I was always thinking about college. Even when I lived in Texas, they have a Texas program where if you score a certain score on your test, you get a free ride. So I was planning on that from like third grade, and I wanted to go to UT. But anyway, so we moved. That was no longer the picture. I ended up getting a free tuition scholarship to the University of Arizona, where I studied business management and entrepreneurship.
Wow.
And I did this one internship my junior year in New York City.
You were still pretty young there then, right? Early 20s.
Yeah, I was about 21 at that time.
Right.
And then I was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do.
Right.
And LA was really attractive because it wasn't too far away. I always liked going there and all that good stuff. And that's kind of where I landed my first job.
Which was?
I did sales at a recruitment company where they were the first company in the US to do what's called gig economy or freelance consulting. So we basically had ex-McKinsey, ex-Bain consultants that we would place across the Fortune 500. So it was my job to call C-suite executives and directors at Microsoft, Wall Street, the biggest companies you could figure out, and just be like, hey, will you meet with my boss? Because we want to talk to you about consulting. And that's when I realized like this huge information gap that students don't have is understanding what people do and like talking to professionals. And that's when I really started learning about careers, was in my first job, because of what I was essentially forced to do if I wanted to keep my job. So.
And you had to be a good communicator, obviously, because you just don't go to the phone book and say, okay, let me call Fortune 500 big one and say, I'd like to talk to your executive CEO if I can, please. And they say, what?
Yeah. And it goes even beyond communication. I had to understand, if I'm calling the head of strategy at News Corp in the media industry, why should she care about what I'm saying? I have to understand whose background I could entice her with and pitch that. So I had to understand, why people hire people and what people can offer a business. And none of that is taught in school.
Right.
None of it. Even as a double business major, you don't learn about any of that real world stuff until it's kind of too late and you go down a path that's maybe not like what you would actually want to do.
Right. So the objective then was, when you called the bigger companies, to trigger them and to inviting a consultant to assist them in HR mainly, or what was the objective? Or also in a general sense about business skills and all the things associated to it?
So the main objective was to call them and get them to schedule a short intro call with my boss. On that call, we would ask questions about their business and the challenges they were having to try to uncover some pain points. And then we would say, hey, instead of going to a big consulting firm that costs millions of dollars, for example, let's say the Gates Foundation was one of the clients I worked with often, and they could go hire a really big McKinsey to solve a problem that they have in South Africa about a particular drug that they're rolling out. However, in our network, we had an ex-McKinsey partner who also was a doctor who has expertise in Africa that would cost a third of the price. So we did everything from strategy through execution projects across every industry. So I really downloaded, and everyone at my first job downloaded all this crazy knowledge about the different industries and careers and how to solve problems against almost like every type of business, doing sales.
Okay, one point I quickly was going to make, Emily, is that you mentioned the Gates Foundation. And for the people watching us from around the world, that refers to, correct me if I'm wrong, Bill Gates, who was the founder of Microsoft, obviously, and then him and his wife, former wife, still involved together, as I understand it, used a lot of their fortunes to trigger opportunities in a number of areas, in areas that were less evolved and needed help and assistance of some sort.
Yes, they are a huge philanthropy, and they have various, goals, right? And like any company, yes. And like any company, they don't necessarily always have the expertise in-house they need. And so that's where, consultants come in, whether it's a nonprofit with billions of dollars or Microsoft themselves, right? So.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, I interrupted you. I just wanted to get that. So take us further there, so that, because what I'm trying to go to is that, so that's where you work, that's where you got a lot of experience and learned the skills of interacting and negotiating to a certain extent, because you are the initial trigger to get your boss, the communicator that had the package or whatever it is, and then take it the next step, obviously with the objective to say, okay, let's now have a face-to-face meeting, and then hopefully we be brought on board, and then the conclusion would be sitting around the boardroom table of some sort with other key persons in the structure, saying he has issues that we can that he can bring to the table that will help us. That was ultimately the objective, I presume.
Yes, and that job I took, I was interviewing at Goldman Sachs and General Mills and these big companies coming out of college, but I chose to go this route because it was a women-owned business. It was entrepreneurial, and I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur someday, and I knew I'd have to learn sales if I was going to have any shot. So that's kind of why I did that. But then I think couple key points. So picking up on those skills and getting experience. But then I also noticed a couple things, like a couple really important things. I think one was that I would see on these projects the value of interviewing people, not just the consultants and understanding what they did, but we would pay thousands of dollars for an hour to interview people for a project, because they had knowledge that you can't just find. Like, sure, you can go on Google and get general knowledge or even ChatGPT now, but it's different than talking to an expert who has done that thing. It saves a lot of time. So I knew that was really valuable. And I also realized networks were really valuable, because we had created this network of thousands of high-end consultants, and we had their resumes and we had their contact information, and we were able to build a business because of that and work with the Fortune 500. And then the other thing I noticed is I realized what sells. I knew how much people were charging a day or an hour or by project, and I was studying their background. And sometimes we would literally not pitch a person or sell a person unless they had a top MBA, right? They're like, oh, well, we're going to position this person because they got a top 15 MBA. We're going to put that one forward for a project over this other person. And my bosses went to Harvard Business School and Wharton. And so that's kind of when I was like, I need a top MBA as well. So that's kind of how I started going down that path.
And so then when you decided this is time for me to go to the next step, you learned from where you were operating and some of those, as you explained already, and you then became the founder, CEO of Advize. And Advize is, I was wondering, I said, oh, why does he call it Advize? I know now, so, and that was very well done, because you had to make sure that you have the credentials, which you do, and obviously UCLA, and then being entrepreneurial and having your experience in LA with the major company and working with top 500 companies, direct and indirect, prepared you for the next thing, and then saying, okay, here I have the tools in my toolbox. Now I need a name for what will draw attention. So, and I thought it was very skillfully how you chose Advize. And obviously the results of that were fairly rapidly and fairly quickly, because in the first year already you became successful. Now I just want to take one step back, because so that I understand what you did. You had the skill set, you had the confidence, you're a good communicator. You have been in situations where you've been rejected and saying, no, I don't want to talk to your boss, and I don't mind talking to you, but I don't want to talk to your boss. I'm not interested. And so then you lay the foundation, and then you don't stop. You go to others and others, and on and on and on. So you had that experience and what it takes. And then the other part is that you had to develop a database, sizable one, of where you can make in your vehicle being Advize the same to attract, finding the weak spots even in larger structures that could be multi-billion or billion or multi-million or whatever it is, and find that weak spot. And then, but you already had identified somebody being qualified in that region, so you could bring together the expert in the region together with you and to the boardroom office table where difficult decisions are made, where a discussion would start, and all of a sudden after the discussion, with about 3, 4, 5 people, whatever they are, they said, we want them on board because they have a different approach. And so do I kind of catch it correctly up to this point?
Yes, that's a big part. And I would say one other critical piece of all of this was right before business school, I got a new job, which was at one of the biggest recruitment agencies in the world called Michael Page. And there I was on the learning and development and training team. So I had the sales experience and all the consulting knowledge, like you're saying, but then what I got was hands-on training experience to teach recruiters how to become experts about careers really fast, and how to teach them how to interview people and how to network. And so I would teach hundreds of people the best practices of recruitment. And I would do this over and over again in training sessions. So then I got all this program management knowledge and recruitment specific knowledge that helped also really develop key parts of Advize that I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise, like training. We have an entire internship program where we pay and train students to go on LinkedIn and source how we get all of our content. We have over 10,000 videos now. And I was able to scale that really effectively and help everyone be successful and build that kind of program out because I had that experience as well.
So, and that's not something you learned at UCLA. Not something you would learn in Clifton at the school or anywhere else. That is in real life, finding job opportunities that when you want to initially to LA, that gave you that exposure of the initial phone call to bring forward your boss and do analysis as much as possible, and then starting Advize, and then having the database, and then in between that, the other step that you did is becoming involved in recruitment management, and you became a speaker on it and taught people, hundreds of them, thousands maybe of them in some form, including using new technology like LinkedIn and others to give you exposure, but also broadened your experience and access to potential skill sets that would be useful to you in Advize. So So the key for you is education. And then you mentioned somewhere along the line, I believe you said that, the requirement was to have an MBA at some point. Was, something that you looked at or somebody else looked at it as a requirement and for experience. And then I have to throw a little bit of me in because I'm nearly 85 years young. And my birthday is on November the 1st, actually, and then I'm 85.
That's my dad's birthday.
Say again?
Did you say November 1st?
Yes. Yeah.
That's my dad's birthday.
Oh, no. Oh, my goodness. I love it. Yeah.
There you go. I know I like you.
Is he 85? No, in Richard, thank you.
No. No, I don't know if he wants to be telling the world his age, but...
No, so it doesn't matter. But I say 85 years young. So the other thing that I was going to say, I was born in Holland in 1940, obviously, and things were tough and difficult and blah, 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 and all the other things, self-hardships that we should not have seen, were liberated by the Canadian Army. They made such an impression on me when I was 5 years old that I said, when I grew up as a 5-year-old, I go to the land of my heroes, Canada. That's what I wanted to do. And so then academically, I was not a success story. And so I failed grade 3, I failed grade 7 3 times, and they said, what are we going to do with this guy? Now, my parents were beautiful people, and some people said, send him to the mentally challenged school. He said, no, we're not going to do that. So they sent me to a furniture maker that my dad had a friend at a furniture factory, and that's where they sent me in and saying, man, he has to work with his hands because the teachers even, with all due respect to teachers, I love them and I'm doing a fabulous job, but a lot of times they said, well, John is not bright enough for any of that. So, and friends can be very hard on you. You know, the friends that I had in grade 7 that went on to college and university, I became a laborer and they kind of looked down on me somewhat, but I knew I was just as smart as the others. Not smarter then, but I felt I had this PTSD from the inner child left from the war years, and then going to Canada, and when I was 24 years old, I wanted to start with nothing. 1 suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and I wanted to build a lumber mill, and the timber is in British Columbia, so I took the plane into Montreal, and then the train across Canada, 4 days, 5 nights. My God, that is a long way. Anyway, came to Vancouver, went through the immigration department, could speak English. Didn't have a job, could speak English, and didn't know a soul. And fortunately, there was a German fellow. I told him I want to build a lumber mill. And he said, go to Prince George. That's where I am now, 60 years in Prince George. I can still see where the Greyhound station was. I came off the bus here with my suitcase, 3 books, and 2 sets of clothes. And I counted my money at least 3 times. And I had exactly $25.47. But what I did have, attitude, even from the time I was a kid, although there was lots of negative, I always was a believer. And I avoided negative. I still do that today. If you have negative, stay clear of me. So passion, whatever I do, I give it 125%. And work ethic, I work harder, even now, than anybody around me really. I get up at 5:30, at 85. I get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always make my bed, and I always think I'm late. And so, but I became very good, when I came here with my $25.47, I did build a lumber mill, and within 10 years, I had my lumber mill already built. I became very good in business, and now I'm an author, and obviously I'm successful in podcasting. I became a good communicator by accidental, it wasn't before, but I did because. And so that coming back to the whole thing that I've done a lot of business, I've been in a lot of board meetings, and I believe, with all due respect of the friends of mine that have MBAs, I have an MBA plus, but all learned the hard way, which makes me very valuable in terms of advice, and because I lived it all. and so I was just going to throw that in, and saying that does not mean I say do not follow becoming an MBA. I'm not saying that. I simply say that hands-on and doing the job as you have, in addition to becoming an MBA, but made you successful is going through the way that you did in Clifton, then in Arizona, then in LA, when you first started to contact those huge companies or individual groups and making the contact, major experience. Then obviously the other part that you did is then becoming in recruitment, that became, and that then laid the foundation for you already being natural, an entrepreneurial individual, is that then created Advize.
Yes. And I love that you bring up the point of kind of like the academic smart or street smart, right? And I think to be an entrepreneur, you have to have street smarts. I don't think being an academic leads to successful business people, to be honest. The reasons that I chose to go to school were a couple things. I think one was the credibility, or the fact that no one could take an education away from me. It was kind of like, it's hard to get in, it's prestigious, it's competitive. Like, I liked all that stuff. And going back to the whole network idea, like, I knew going to school was going to open up networking doors like I've never seen. So going back to my first job, sometimes if I was having trouble breaking into a company, I would go on LinkedIn, see where the leadership went to business school. And if they had the same business school as my boss, it was a meeting like that. And so that's what I was in it for, right?
Yeah.
But you're totally right. Like, experience, failure, trying things. I think that whole like attitude and work ethic is critical. And I've tried several businesses before this. I've probably had 5 internships, even when I was in high school and college, like always trying a bunch of stuff, figuring things out. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel like a lot of people complain about how hard everything is these days, but guess, like, things have always been hard in different ways. And I think the one thing in people's control is try a bunch of stuff, and you're going to get some feedback. You're either going to get feedback that like, yeah, this is working, or no, it's not, but you're not going to get anything if you don't do anything. So.
Exactly. Yeah. The no that you get if you don't do it, right? So the other part that I always say, people say to me, how do you become successful? I said, well, the amazing thing about it is success will come to find you. The key for you is, do you recognize it? And then the other one is, for me, the foundation is attitude, passion, work ethic, but follows is success. And what I found in my experience, and I do a lot of presenting in colleges, high schools to a certain extent, universities, whatever. I do a lot of presenting. Is that, that if I ask to some of the people, say, what are you going to do after this? And say, I don't know. And say, well, it's very important that, I believe respectfully, that you start looking around, because to have a direction becomes very, very important. Hypothetically speaking, you want to be a truck driver, talk to truck drivers and saying, what should I have? Should I have a truck, 1 truck, 2 trucks? Should I go long haul, short haul? All those they love to talk to you. Or you want to be a contractor, you want to build houses, talk to somebody that is doing that and saying, what do you do? How do you go about it? Or for that matter, you want to be a doc, a lawyer, or whatever, a specialist in some field, but talk to an entrepreneur if you wish. Ask them if you can have a coffee with them at an appropriate time, and tell them that you're kind of searching. And lots of them want to be supportive. But yes, you must have a direction. And as you did, and as I did, even when I was young already, I was entrepreneurial. I brought newspapers around, I sold magazines, I collected glass bottles in Holland, and we could sell those for. I always made sure I had a few dollars, or in that time, guldens in my pocket. But I always believed that even the challenges that I had in schools, because at the point that I was going through this, and something that I at that point didn't realize, I'm ADHD and I have dyslexia, and I did not realize that until much, much later. Actually, I wrote a book about that as well. it took me till I was 62, and that I was diagnosed by my doc. I read a book. I found a book, Driven to Distraction. That was about ADHD and dyslexia. I said, "Oh my God, that's me!" And then it took me 5 years before I would go to my doc, who delivered our 2 daughters, and was a personal friend, and he said, "Hey, John, why are you here?" I said, "I think I got ADHD." And so we checked it out, and I do. And then the more I found out about it, even before I went there, it took me 5 years when I saw the book and I knew I was ADHD. I had to find out what it was all about. I Googled it and checked it out. And the more I saw about it, the more I read about it, I say, it's a superpower. And that's how I feel today. And at 62, I was diagnosed with ADHD. Can you imagine, Emily? I'm sure you can. At 12 and a half years old, after failing grade 7 for the 3rd time, I became a laborer. And so I still remember the school came out on Friday. The kids were then having summer holidays. And and I thought I was going to have holidays too. My parents, I love my parents, but my dad said, no, so that now you're going to have to work. So on that weekend, after school came out, we went to a friend that had a clothing store, and I had to get 3 sets of coveralls. But I was a little small guy, so they didn't have coveralls that small, so I had to roll it up several times, and the crotch was hanging by my knees. Modern today, but it wasn't then. So on Monday I was in the furniture factory. So, but the point that I'm making is this one, is that for 50 years, from the time that I was 12 and a half, and again, amazingly, and people didn't recognize it, didn't understand, and was considered to be not bright enough and all the other kind of stuff. I stayed the course, and I believed that I could start all over again, and I did it here. But for 50 years. And so the more I found out about it after that as well, is that up to maybe 30% of the population globally have neurodiversity issues, including ADHD, dyslexia, and the combination of others, that are being more recognized than they were in the past. Right. And that's a good thing. And the other thing about me, just quickly mentioning that, so that when I understood it, I already was successful. I had already quite a number of companies, but I was still struggling with, who am I? Why am I different in my own mind? And it was only then, in my early 60s, 62 forward, that I then became more successful in business. I started to write books. I'm working on the 6th one now. I then became active as a speaker and a presenter. And all those things came naturally to me, that I already had those qualities when I was young. Like in school, even at grade 3, grade 7, I always was very good at numbers. And I was a very good writer, not a reader, dyslexia obviously. But those came out, and then I became a very good presenter, and obviously I love podcasting, and I'm globally top 1% group, and I love to do that and share it with others.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I think, from what I understand, I would agree that the neurodivergent, ADHD, all of that was a bit more misunderstood in my parents and any generation before mine. It was definitely not a conversation that was even a thing. But I think what's tough about the way our educational system is designed is it really does teach almost perfectionism. And it's not really great for people who have ADHD and all those things. I have family and or friends that I know who are very much like your background, but they are very successful and they were not good at school. I just happened to be good at it. And I think it's because it kind of made me a perfectionist, because all of a sudden everything I was doing was, I'm just going to get A's. So that whole transition from school to the real workforce was also difficult, because I realized I had all these perfectionist tendencies and I couldn't be a perfect employee and I would just get promoted or make more money. I had to kind of start over, and nothing I worked for my whole life as a young adult really mattered. Even though I had a 4.2 GPA in high school, I got a free tuition to college. The only reason the recruiter even cared about me, I think, or one of the reasons, after kind of hitting the minimum requirements, was that I was a state softball champion, right? Like, she didn't even look at any of my academic stuff. And that's why I got my job. So, I never want something on my record, if you will, to like work against me. So I'm always going to put myself with education, because that works for me and I do that really well. I'm going to do that, and I won't have anything that works against me. But in my first job, I'm pretty sure I got my interview because I was a competitive softball person, not because of all the other stuff I thought I was doing that would matter.
So the interesting part about it, Emily, is that I had the same as you, that I'm not very good at things that I'm not interested in, like i.e. The school and talking about things. I had no idea. If they would ask me after 4 days sitting in school at grade 3 or grade 7 3 times, if they asked me what did he talk about, I have no idea. So I was not there. But any of the other things, though, that if I'm interested, as you were, then I would have done the same as you did, be very successful in the things that I pursue. Attitude, passion, work ethic, and then what will follow is success. And so once I got past saying, who am I? Then things became easier for me, and not saying I'm better than the other things, but I have certain qualities that makes me unique versus others. And some of them I'm very good with numbers. And even the financial people around me cannot imagine how I can do all this, and with my background in particular, although they don't question that much these days, obviously. And then the other one, obviously, I'm a good presenter, but it took years for me to get that, to build self-confidence and saying, I know who I am, but I already was successful in business, but I still did not feel that until I saw ADHD and dyslexia, and saying, I cannot believe that that's me. And then from there on things changed. But that brings us also to that the teaching system that we have today, obviously for obvious reasons, as I indicated, is not as effective as it can be, I believe, looking back, and is changing now. And that brings us to, like in my case at 85, is that type of a background, worked all my life. I'm very good at technology, very good, meaning for an 85-year-old. Yes, I do email, I work on computers, and I'm extremely interested in AI. For those that think that it will go back in the bottle, no, it won't. It will change all our lives. And it is already, and I believe it will be a transformation that will exceed. I still have a computer that we bought in the early 80s, from Microsoft, and all the ones in Apple and all of that kind of stuff. AI will be similar to that, but likely exceed it. And I believe that part to me is interesting. The other part is interesting to me as an 85-year-old, is I'm very active in podcasting, and I believe the media is changing dramatically from traditional media, CNN, ABC, and all of the others, BBC, Canadian broadcasting, and newspapers. It's changing now that podcasting will become a major platform for communications worldwide. It's only beginning. And I was very fortunate to get involved very, very early, and I believe I'm very good at it. And approaching 1 million subscribers on YouTube, hey, not bad for an 85-year-old with grade 3 and grade 7. that grew up speaking dialect in his community, couldn't even speak High Dutch, and then learned to speak High Dutch. I barely had that under control. Then I came to Canada, I had to learn to speak English. So the point is simply, and I'm writing a book about that now, is yes, you can. And so anybody that says to me, no, they can't, they can. And if that affects health, fitness, and staying, is quality of life critically important. And, so, and all of those things is saying, no, I'm too old, or I can't do this. And I can. Yes, you can.
Your beliefs are your reality.
I believe that too. So take us into AI, because that's another part of your, issues of interest and concern, that it's through AI-powered career playlist and over 110,000 real-world professional stories. So tell us your experience with AI and how you see it.
Yes. So I'm going to hit on a couple other things that you touched on as well. So there's a couple things that I see and really believe is the future and are like very important. So we've talked about a couple of those things, or you've mentioned them briefly. So one is that people, if they want to be inspired or learn about what their path is, it's critical to talk to people who do that thing. Right. And so the biggest problem that I see in the market, and why I've started Advize and run Advize, is because in the US alone, there's about 12 million college students, and 15 million, and over 11 million or almost 12 million don't even do one live conversation with a professional when they're in college. So, and there's a couple reasons for that. It's not really, I would say, their fault. I would say, number one, it's really difficult for underserved communities. So anyone who's first generation, international, et cetera, they don't have the networks or confidence on average to go out and find these people and talk to them. They can't call up their dad's friend who works at, Microsoft or whatever. It also takes a lot of time. So we found it could take over 20 hours for a student to just talk to 10 professionals. And they don't really know who they should be talking to because they don't understand the business world or careers. When I was in college, I reached out and talked to 10, 20 people because I knew I was supposed to. But basically what I did, I Google searched Los Angeles cool brands. And so I found these like brand advertising companies, and I talked to the CEOs because I thought, well, they work with, Coca-Cola. Like, that's important because it's Google or Coca-Cola. Students think about logos and brands. They don't understand businesses and job functions. And that kind of brings me to my last point, which is they don't have the skills and confidence to reach out to these people. But then also in schools, I've met with about 200 university career center leaders in the last 6 months, selling advice, talking about their problems. And only a handful have required career classes in a first year experience or any part of their career experience out of school. So what we do is we take informational interviews. So we interview professionals about their career in a standardized format of 13 questions that we developed in business school by taking guides from top schools. And these guides basically are what they hand students to say, hey, go do these conversations and here's what you should ask. So we didn't reinvent any wheel. We just took the guides, created the structure, and now
guys and girls, right? They could be male or female, right?
For the interviews?
Yeah, or just guys, guys and girls.
Oh, interviews.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
So on our platform now we have about 900 people interviewed, right, and they each answer 13 questions, and each is in an individual clip.
Right.
So on our platform, there's a couple ways to search. We have all these filters that people tag themselves as, like what I studied, what company I work at, the industry, what type of role. There's any type in a job title search. And there's also an open AI box where you can just type in anything, and we run that across the transcripts of all of our videos and recommend content relevant to the students. And so the biggest value to the students is there's nowhere else. There is nowhere else on the internet or in the world you could hear 3 consultants talking about their day in less than 5 minutes, and then us reporting on how much you're learning by you telling us and keeping track of all of that. And there's nowhere else on the internet you could sort by any company that you want, any industry that you want, and get those insights before you go talk to somebody to figure out, hey, do I want to talk to that person? Is this something I vibe with? Before we go pick the wrong career. I really believe we're like the missing career research step that also taps into these also like awesome things like the alumni giving back to their schools to help students in the classroom. And then I put them out on media, kind of like a podcast. So they're also seen as a for their own brand online of, well, I gave my time back to these students and I'm interviewing about my job. So that's really the value proposition to the students, is that knowledge and that information has all been collected for them to help them accelerate and figure out what they want to do. Because that's what really sets up someone's entire life, is those critical choices in their younger years.
So how do people that are watching us, is that under the umbrella of Advize, or is it, how do people contact that information and other information about you and what you have done so amazingly using today's technology, including AI and data information in a very effective way? So how do people contact you or find out more about it?
Yes, so they can go check out the site now. There is a free version where they can watch content and access that for free. So that's just at advisehub.com. So that's Advize with the Z, hub.com. And then for me, I'm Emily McSherry on LinkedIn, but my email is emily@advisehub.com.
Okay, and then, so that I like what you're doing there, because that is something that has been missing. And as you indicated, is that when I saw your bio, I thought that is using new technology, new ideas, and then something that would take somebody many thousands of hours to find, you can find in 30 minutes.
Yes, and instead of using AI to create fake content, we use the power of real content and real stories and use AI to help people find the right content faster.
So that brings me also to the question, what does the future career exploration look like? How is Gen Z approaching career differently than previous generation? And you already partially answered that, but maybe you want to explore a little bit further.
There's a couple things going on in this market now that are really shaking things up. And one would be, because of AI, there's a lower hiring need for entry-level talent across the board, which people go to college to get entry-level jobs. And then there's been a lot of federal funding cuts in the US for higher education institutions. So all of that is making things a bit crazy right now. And one of the things that we do when we partner with the university is we build out custom alumni content libraries for them within the tool, so their students can hear and learn from future versions of themselves, which is a great way to market the business. But as part of that, we work with a lot of student interns who are going through this currently. And things boil down to a couple things. I think one is really ambitious students are realizing they need to network and get to know people, because people hire people no matter what's going on. And then the second thing is, I really believe, based on what we were saying earlier, that everything's going to video, right? I remember when TikTok came out, I was like, no one's going to use this thing. It seems silly, like photos are it. And so we're on like this cutting edge of video for employment, right? Where like employee stories, I honestly don't even know if the job description or resume market are going to be relevant anymore, because one thing that's happening is people are using AI to write their resumes. So then
Exactly.
on LinkedIn, for example, before AI, there were 250 applications a minute. Any guess on what that is now?
I'm scared to guess.
It's
A
almost
fraction.
12,000. It's almost 12,000 a minute. So it's almost up 5,000%.
Yeah.
And now all the applications look like everyone's a good applicant. But now recruiters on the other side don't even know it's creating a lot of false positives and wasting a lot of time. So I think this whole market's getting shooken up a bit. But I think the one thing that Gen Z wants are, authenticity in videos, and they can have real conversations. But I do think we're going to see a lot of change in this market, and it's only really the beginning. And I think video is going to be a big part of it.
No question. And then the other thing, Emily, which I believe is important for women listening who might be in their own confused in Texas, as you were, and in your early age moment, whether about careers can start a business, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that anything is really possible. You just have to, and there's so many tools in your hands. There's so much knowledge out there. Just go and learn. And if you're really drawn to something, that's your calling. Go figure out how to do it. Don't care about whoever you were in the past. People can recreate themselves and become whoever they want. And there's plenty of people out there that are willing to help you, but you do need to be able to ask and be curious enough to go educate yourself about how to get it done by seeing who else has done it, learning about what they did, and just applying those strategies yourself.
And that being said, the last book that I wrote got released July 31st, is top on Amazon, is that $1 billion communication skills, the most critical part from my perspective for success, become a effective and a good communicator. It's not being taught usually in schools, but it is critical to success. This is not a book about how to become a billionaire. Indirectly, it is. Work hard, attitude, passion, all of, but it's more about communication skills. And that part is critical. And so, and then the other message from me personally is saying that, and people said, I'm too old for this and I'm too old for that. Well, at 85, I can say, and my birthday is just like your dad's, is at November the 1st. I wrote a book, the one before that, Living Young, Dying Old, and Age in the Middle Age. That's a picture of me. I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America. And so, nice. And I started actually when I already was in my 60s. I started then after I nearly died about another thing, diverticulitis, blah, 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 blah. Got an operation, they said, you came that close. And then I changed my life. I looked at my diet. My wife is a vegetarian. I didn't listen as well, but now I do. So first I was 80-20, now I'm 90-10. And then at the same time, I went to the gym, and I've been in the gym for the last 19 years, and I will be competing. And so I competed in Northern BC, bodybuilding and physique, came in second. The same happened then provincially, then nationally, and then qualified for the Arnolds. And I'm again going to compete in the Arnolds in 2026. And if you know Arnold, tell him I'm back. So the last question I was going to ask you, what are the biggest challenges you faced in starting your own company? And if you kind of look back on all the way to your early days in Clinton in Texas, the 3,000 or 300 people town, but if you then look back, what were your biggest challenges that you had to overcome that then took you to the road where you are today?
Yes. Yeah, that's a hard one. I think, so one of my biggest life challenges in general, right? Because life and business, they're the same. I mean, probably my biggest challenge was that move, that culture shock, like all that change, right? Because my whole identity was kaput.
Yeah.
And so when you're young and you don't know who you are, that's really confusing. And you're almost defined by what other people say about you and your environment. And those things aren't in your control. And then if you're not around people with a bigger mindset, you feel like I always kind of felt like I was not myself for a long time, right? Like I was almost like missing something, I think. And so I think that whole identity and figuring out who you are in your 20s is really hard. And ironically, that I started a life coaching business at that time because I kind of figured it out. And then I started teaching other people. And I think one of the things that, like a concept that helped me not have anxiety, helped me feel confident, and know who I am is really thinking about like, what are my values and actually defining what those are. That can shift over time. Because if you think about, okay, at the end of my life, if these people are saying these things about like, what do I want people to say about me? Like, who am I? And then if I could define those into values or practices that I live by, then all of my decisions are right. So, for example, one of mine has always been responsibility, which is not like a sexy thing. But I feel very responsible because I know how hard my parents worked. I know how hard their generations before them worked. I know being a woman this day and age to be an entrepreneur is still rare. Getting a top MBA is not something that a lot of people did generations before me. And I feel like I have all these ideas and like I have the potential, right? And so I feel very responsible for doing something with that. And because it's very easy to say, oh, screw entrepreneurship. I'm just going to go back and get a whatever job and like kick up my feet. So for example, the fact that I have that responsibility value instilled in me or like defined, it helps me make decisions, how I'm going to spend my money, what I'm going to do with my time, who I'm going to be with, what I'm going to do. So that whole concept is something that was really pivotal for me. And then later on, as an entrepreneur and talking to other entrepreneurs and going through this process, I think the hardest thing, especially at the beginning, and it's still hard, is all the mindset, because creating something that's never been done and getting rejected and not doing the safe but more riskier option is not necessarily celebrated by people around you. You get a lot of, what are you doing? What is this? I don't get this. You should do that. You should do this. You have $200,000 in your student loans and you're not going to go get a job. So and then for yourself, you wake up every day needing to push forward and create something that does not move without you. So you have to be in the right mindset. And I realized I had to almost shift into the successful multimillionaire entrepreneur attitude before I had a single sale, if anyone was going to listen to me. Because I was kind of in this scared mindset, like, oh, what if I fail? You know, what if my pitch doesn't go well? And guess what? No one listens to that. So I had to very quickly be like, okay, I am that person. Like, what would that person do right now? And that has really opened up doors. And that's when I started having success.
You are an inspiration to many, in particular women, but not exclusive to that, around the world, male and females. And we have a lot of things in common in terms of, I claim to have an MBA hands-on. And then the who am I was probably the biggest challenge for me. It took me till I was 62, until I was diagnosed ADHD and dyslexia. And then from there on in, the doors opened for me in terms of my success in business and all the other things, and as a communicator and all of that stuff, and confidence. And so I say to people that be positive first and foremost. Attitude, passion, work ethic, but will follow success. And then I have an obligation in my case where for 50 years I was wondering, why am I so different, that I share it with the world wherever I can. And if it helps 1, 2, 3 or 4 or whoever it can help, that to me is the reward. And that's the way I look at it. Emily, it was a privilege to have you on my podcast. Let's stay in touch. You are an inspiration for many, but not exclusive to women, but what you can do, and including new technology that we now have in the world, including AI and all the other things. And for those people that say, I'm old, and if they are 60, this 85-year-old one is interested in AI and all the technology that is working, podcasting and all the other things that makes me get up in the morning. And I'm excited about every day is a new day. And so the other thing that I was going to say before we close, that for the people that are watching us, and hopefully it's an inspiration, they want to see more of this, subscribe to us, both Emily McSherry as well. Like it, share it with others, comment if you wish. And, again, as I said, podcasting is the new media that is exploding as we speak, and we want to be part of it. I want to be part of it. And for those people that are watching us, you want to be part of it as well. Sherry, it was a privilege. Thanks, Emily. It was a privilege. And say to your dad, happy birthday.
I will. Happy early birthday, John.
Thank you. Thanks, Emily. Appreciate it. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.